Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be part of this session. Before I begin my talk, rightfully the talk is Mindfulness, the Art of Synchronous Living. Largely, it would cover two themes. The first theme is around the significance of language and the important role that it plays. And the second part is around the power of intention. So these are the two frames on which this whole presentation is based on. Now, before I begin the presentation, what I quickly wanted to do is to do a small test with all of you. If I were to ask you to look at the slide behind me and see the color, recognize the color, invariably it's going to be easy, right, for most of you. You can easily recollect the color as well as the word. But if I were to flip this a little bit, and now if I were to ask you to identify the color, it becomes slightly difficult, right? So it's slightly difficult. It creates a little bit of dissonance in your brain. Now, there's a little bit of incongruence to this. This is something known as the Stroop Effect. So this is a psychological tool which is used extensively for clinical investigation, was largely used during the Cold War to identify the Russian spies from the American spies, because they were using a certain script and they would find it difficult to recognize the color. Now, if that's right, then the question arises, if you didn't have a word for something, would it be possible for you to recognize that thing? To answer this question, Professor Jules David Hoff did a small experiment. There's a small tribe known as the Himba in Namibia. So what he did was he reached out to this population and he tried to do a small experiment with them, where he put a circular pattern of the squares that you see on the screen. All of them were green, apart from the one which is blue, right? For most of us who are discerning, we can easily see the blue color, but for the Himba, they could not recognize the blue. So they could not even see the color blue. Now, he repeated the same experiment with the same concept, but with the green squares, only with one variance, that he had a square which was slightly different from the other green. And they could easily identify that because they had some 17 names for the word green. So it was very easy for them to recognize. So what does it say? Language has largely shaped our world, right? Now, what has language done? So language at a macro level has given birth to ideas. It has helped create religion. The whole notion of religion and nations fuels innovation, and also helped us identify with our past at a macro level. And if you were to look at it from a micro level, in terms of who we are, it has helped shape our perceptions, molded our beliefs, also laid down the foundations of the cultural landscape, or the culturescape, as I call it. So this is the dual world that we inhabit. This is the world that we stay in. Now, what I wanted to do with this background is to seed in 4 key ideas. Now, idea 1 is very interesting. If I say we largely live in 2 worlds. Now, there is a tangible and a physical world. This is the world that we can see, we can feel, we can touch, we can sense it, right? Which is the fact, which is fact-based, which we can comprehend. There are some laws governing this. You can validate that. And then there is the intangible or the mental world, based on constructs. We all have a perceptions, right? This is the world which we try and comprehend in our own unique ways. We perceive this world, basis our beliefs and our experiences that we have gathered, and what we think and how we feel. So this is the world that we stay in. And all of us cumulatively aggregate to create shared human experiences. This is the human colossus, or the large human brain that is created through this experience of all individual experience aggregating together. Now, if that's right, then the idea number 2 is equally interesting. The physical world, as I said, is fact-based. However, the mental world is opinion-based and agreement-based, right? So if you look at the physical world, this is based on practices. There are certain laws which governs it. If I were to say this table is made of wood, you wouldn't disagree with me. Lions and tigers are wild animals, you wouldn't disagree with me. Rocks are hard, you wouldn't disagree with me. But when it comes to to the mental world, which is based on beliefs, this is where it gets fascinating, right? We all would have our own impressions of this world. Whether it's the ideas, the idea of career, or myths, concepts, constructs, all is very, very different. All this is very, very different for us in our own unique ways. Now, if that's true, what's equally true is that emotions are real, and it is anchored around language. So look at this circle. Now, it can turn out to be a virtuous circle or a vicious cycle, depending on the kind of thought you generate. If you generate a positive thought, you have positive decisions, you take positive actions, you create positive results. However, if you were to flip it and you start with negative thinking, then you start having a vicious cycle, right? A man becomes what he thinks all day long. That's so true. Now, if that's true, what is really negativity? Negativity is not just about indulging in negative talk or doing something which is very, very pessimistic. It could be across the range, and therefore this is very important for us to identify. All of us in the room would fall in one bracket or the other. What we need to be careful is, what is a predominant type in terms of the negatives that you see? There are 7 types of negative people. There are the complainers, the cancelers, the causalities, who go with the world, there's a cause and an effect. If anything bad happens to me, there's a reason, and the world is a reason, right? Critics. Then you have the commanders, the competitors, and the controllers. Controllers are trying to control the world around. You feel extremely difficult, if you're a controller, to see things happen the way it is. You are very judgmental, and you would want some control of that world. Now with this, I see it in the idea number 4, the key idea number 4, which is becoming successful is a decision, not a destination. If all of us were to focus on the quadrant 4, this is the Eisenhower matrix, which was again reconstructed in one of the TED Talks by Tim Urban. He's a famous blogger, and he reconstructed this. And what is so amazing about this is, if you follow the principle of 20-80, 80% of your focus is in quadrant 4, and you do things which are urgent and important, you invariably would become successful. Now, if that's right, then let's look at the construct. Very simply put, if you are in a negative world, you are unhappy, right? You make unhealthy choices, you become unsuccessful. Very simple. You turn that around, you turn into a positive health, you have a positive positive mindset, you are happy, you make healthy choices, you become successful. Now, what I really wanted to get to through this first part is this whole significance of language, as I said. And how do you then shape your behavior? Our behavior is a combination of 2 things. One is the belief, the impressions that we gather over a lifetime. Usually the impressions are laid out in the first 7 to 8 years of our life when we are young. And that is what we gather. And the second part is the experience that you gain, through the world that you encounter. And when you combine this lays down your foundation for your behavior. And you consistently repeat your behavior, this becomes a habit. And then you see this becomes your destiny and your identity. So very simply put, if you're not happy where you are, you just need to relook into this frame and see what change you want to bring in. This is an amazing line from Michael Beckwith. He is a spiritual leader of the Agape International, and he says something like this: the universe acts as a mirror, it reflects back to you what you are. The miracle of this is that you can shift your identity and the world will obey. The universe will not give what you want, but it will reflect to you who you are. Very profound lines, right? If that's right, let's get into the second part of the construct, which is the philosophy. What are the drivers of the growth mindset? Now, this is equally powerful, and I borrow this from Tony Robbins. He says, we are all equal. At a baseline, all of us in the room are all equal as human beings, but we are not equal in the marketplace. There is a certain value which is attached to all of us, and it is incumbent on us to look into that value that we create. Now, I will put 4 thoughts around how you could restructure that value for yourself. There's a 5-stage framework to excellence. If you look at the first 2 stages, this is about deconstructing yourself. Most of us are in stage 1. We are in the sense of being victims. We're in the world, we complain, we're in a victim state. It is all about me and mine. Some of us who have evolved get to a state of acceptance where you start bringing in a bit of positive energy into your thinking, into your process, and into your behavior. You become confident and emotionally anchored. This is where you start deconstructing, breaking yourself up. And then as you move through stage 3, 4, and 5, this is where you reconstruct yourself. From your awakening, which is where you start recoding your inner world, re-engineering your inner world. There is simplicity and elegance in that process. Then comes stage 4, which is about mindfulness. You become mindful of everything that you're doing, anything that you're touching, anything that you're feeling. You become very mindful, not judgmental. And there is a feeling of bliss and discipline in combination, which is known as blissipin. And finally, transcendental, where you become limitless. You feel that you can do anything. Intuition is at its peak, and you can really move things around you. You feel you are in control. Now, famously, John D Rockefeller, one of the big business magnates, he followed this rule for a long time, and he penned it in a poem in his 80s, which was then published in a book by Ron Chernow. The book was called Titan. He says, "I was early taught to work as well as play. My life has been one long, happy holiday. Full of work and full of play, I dropped the worry on the way, and God was good to me every day." Yep. I come to the second part of the thinking, which is around the thoughts to behavior cycle. Now, if you really want to interrupt how the actions that you take, if you can just follow this cycle, and if you can see, invariably most of us would have the negative and the positive thoughts coming to us. And if we can just filter it as it comes to us and choose only the good thoughts, and what you do is you raise your emotions, you raise your vibration, you raise your emotion. Your response muscle is built. And as your response muscle is built, and as it becomes more and more positive, you are invariably going to take positive actions. And this would lead to a positive behavior, and this becomes a virtuous cycle. This is the cycle that you want to create. The third thing that you would want to do is inculcate the double loop thinking. Most of us, and just if you were to step back and look at some of the decisions you take, you start with a decision that you decided on doing something, you take an action, and then you have a certain outcome. And if you are asked to look back, what you do is you look back into the decision. Now, if you were to just change the thinking by a little bit and say that I'm going to challenge the decision that I'm taking. What's the underpinning assumption that supersedes this decision? What are my assumptions? What are my biases? And if you were to just reflect back, reframe, and then look at the hypothesis that's driving that decision, you'd see a different outcome for yourself. So in your daily life, if you can inculcate the double loop thinking, that makes a big, big difference. And the fourth one, which I feel extremely excited with, and you would have seen this in your life, there are a lot of people who have the same potential. You could compare a Sachin Tendulkar with a Vinod Kambli. Started off with the same potential. Perhaps Vinod Kambli was more talented. Or even if you look at Rohit Sharma and a Virat Kohli in the recent times, or you go to any sport, business, wherever, there are people who come with the same potential. But some people manage to have disproportionate result and impact. Now, why is that? All these people are taking the same action. For us, if you were to see a same Virat Kohli and a Rohit Sharma or a Vinod Kambli or a Sachin Tendulkar were taking the same action on the ground, but the results were different. Now, why is it different? There's one key differentiation that makes a massive, massive impact, which is certainty and belief. If you're almost certain in your mind that you will get to the positive result that you want, invariably your potential goes up. You go beyond your limitation, and you then start taking massive action. And that massive action creates massive results or disproportionate results. That's what makes big impact. So finally, I would summarize this talk with the whole formula. I call this a 4-step formula for synchronous living. We all go through pain. Most of us, invariably, 80%, 90% of us would grow through pain. A few of us who are blessed might grow through inspiration. But there is a cycle through which we go, from pain to inspiration. And that is based on the framework of intuition. Unless and until you name it, as I said, unless and until you give a word to it, you will not claim it. Therefore, the word intuition is extremely important. You need to build that power of intuition in you, the gut feel, that vibe, that positive vibe that you want. And if you're able to do that, and along with it, if you can follow these 4 circles of life, self-discipline, self-responsibility, self-awareness, and self-remembrance, that you're more than what you think, you can create a big impact and you can lead a synchronous life, living in the moment. I end this talk with a beautiful lines from Rumi. He says, run from what's comfortable, forget safety. Live where you fear to live, destroy your reputation, be notorious. I've tried prudent planning long enough. From now on, I'll be mad. Thank you so much.